My name is Jay Linesider. I'm the founding member of the Snook Club. I've been an avid snook fisherman for well over 35-40 years now. I've caught hundreds and thousands of snook fishing mostly bridges at night. That's what I really liked to do when I was living down in Broward County and fishing the bridges around Broward County. A lot of good snook fishing down there. Now that I've moved up to Vero, I'm not doing that as much, more fishing the flats. But today I want to talk to you about the anatomy of a bridge. It's very important for you to understand why the snook are at the bridges and what they're doing at the bridges and where you want to fish the bridge. Each bridge has its own features, which will translate into certain ambush points for the snook. The snook are habitual creatures, and they'll reuse these locations over and over every night, year after year, on a similar tide direction, similar tide flow. The only way to figure out where these spots are by trial and error, unless somebody tells you. Some of these snook will be there year after year, and they'll actually prefer, especially the bigger snook, will prefer the darker edges because sometimes the smaller juvenile snook are faster and they'll beat them to the punch for the first little baits that come through. So sometimes the big snook don't want to be in the actual lit areas and they'll prefer the dark areas of the bridge. But you want to also figure out where the shadow line is. The key to fishing bridges is to know where the shadow lines are and where the current breaks are. The fish are going to want to, the snook are want to be in an area where they don't have to fight too much current, but yet they're going to have baits passing overhead from the current. They're going to let the current bring the bait to them. So as you can imagine, the faster the current, the more the bait, the more they're going to feed. Now, I've had some spots where I could do very well on a slack tide, but the fish tend to spread out on a slack tide, and they're not going to be in those tight spots where they're in like a break from the current because of a piling in front of them or the way the structure of the bridge is, that the bridge is breaking up the current flow and they can just sit outside the area of the bridge or the area of the current. So once you discover these key spots, you could go back to those spots year after year, and you can be reasonably certain when you make a few casts and your cast is perfect and it's right in that spot where you've caught fish before, and you run it through and you don't get bit on the first 4 or 5 casts, you're probably not going to get bit. Your odds go way down after that. But you got to keep trying. And this video is to teach you about anatomy of the bridge. You want to know where you're going to try after that first spot. Where should you go to the second spot? Angles are also important. The fish expect the bait to be coming at a certain angle and a certain speed on a certain tide. So you're going to have to change your angle of presentation till you find the exact angle that snook is expecting that bait to come through, and it's going to hit it. A little bit of difference in angle can make all the difference in the world. Now, your other thing besides the angle are the depths. Sometimes they're feeding on the top, sometimes they're feeding in the middle, and sometimes they're feeding on the bottom. And that's another thing you're going to have to do. You're going to have to explore where the fish are. You know, you want to burn one through across the top. You want to go right through the middle, and then you want to go on the bottom and go low and slow. A lot of times low and slow is the way to go, but if they're feeding on mullet on the surface, you know, they're going to be wanting to find that bait on the top. And your best chance is to be going quicker and up near the surface when the mullet run's occurring. Today we're assuming you're at a typical intracoastal bridge, bridge going over the Intracoastal, somewhere in the east coast of Florida. West Coast has similar type bridges. They don't go over the Intracoastal necessarily, but they have a lot of flow, and that's what you want. You want a bridge that is close to an inlet and has lots of flow, and preferably has lots of bait. So I'm going to change my screen up here and show you a bridge and the outline of a bridge, and show you where the spots are that you should try to fish in the first few casts, and then how you move around the bridge. This is your typical Intracoastal bridge, and they don't all look like this, but there's a ton of them that do. So I'm using this as your typical bridge. You get the bridge tender place up here, and a lot of times there'll be lights on there, and that's good because that could create a shadow line. This yellow here is the shadow line that you would be seeing at night, coming from the overhead street lights into the water, and they're going to cut off right about in here, and of course they're not going to go under the bridge too far. And then here's the other shadow line here. So what you're going to want to do is pick the first spot where you'd want to fish, and this is the #1 quadrant on this bridge that I have picked. And the first place that I want to throw my swim bait or my FLAIRHAWK is right here, the red spot. A lot of times the snook will be right here facing into the current. Their head will be this way, tail will be down this way, and they'll be fighting that current, waiting for a bait. And now this particular fender will break the current. There'll be like a eddy around the front of this this fender, and that'll allow the snook not to fight as much current, because there'd be like a buildup of water pressure, some kind of hydraulic physics that I'm not going to get into, but they won't have to swim as hard if they're positioned right here in front of the bridge if they were 10-15 feet out this way. So that's the first place you're going to want to cast, is right there. And then you're going to want to position the boat, or wherever you are. If you're from the bridge, you want to stand here and you want to cast up this way and bring your lure right past that spot. The next place you want to cast is this yellow spot, and you want to cast up this way and you want to bring it back past this way. And then the third spot, and this is really, you can only do this if you're in a boat, is throw up this way and bring it to right here. Now typically if you're in a boat, you'd be parked down here and you'd want to bring your cast and bring it all the way under here. Now it's going to be dark underneath here, and that's where the fish is likely to be hanging out, underneath the bridge, right in the dark spot. Now each place has different shadow lines. Sometimes there'll be a light on the end right here, and that'll show the height of the bridge to the boaters, and sometimes there'll be another one on the opposite quadrant down here. So those lights will put out an area of light around here, and a lot of times the fish will be oriented to that, but sometimes there aren't any lights like that showing you anything about the height of the bridge, or there's no lights on the ends of the fender. But if there are, you want to pay close attention to them. But always there's going to be some kind of lights over the top of the bridge that are going to make this pattern right here. Now, if after the 5 minutes of casting I didn't get anything here, the fourth place I'd try is on this side right here. I'd station myself down here somewhere, and then I'd cast, and I'd want to hit this spot right here. Now after you've worked this quadrant, if this is your favorite quadrant because you caught fish here before, you're not done. You don't just leave and say, hey, there's no fish here today. No, you want to go to quadrant number 2, and you want to kind of reverse the process. You want to start off with the tip right there. That's a #1 spot. And then you want to go casting up here down to there. Now then you want to go try this spot, the yellow spot. You want to go cast it up here and bring your lure down this way. And then the third spot is down here. Last but not least, you want to fish the outside. There's usually not a lot of current going around the outsides, but some places there are. Some places, the best place is going to be outside over here. So never give up. Never say, hey, there's no fish at this bridge, because until you throw your bait on the bottom, in the middle, and on the top, you haven't really fished that quadrant and that half of the bridge. So now we covered this half of the bridge. Let's try the third quadrant. The third quadrant is going to be down here, and usually, you know, if the current's going this way, like from top to bottom, the fish aren't going to be on this side as much, but you never know. If there's good lights over here and there's a good shadow line over here, maybe this bridge has a better fender on the down current side. So then my first place on the third quadrant would be right here, of course, and I'd want to cast and throw it up this way, and then I'd want to throw it up this way and bring it back this way, and then I want to throw it up this way and bring it back this way, and then last but not least, on this third quadrant, I'd want to cast here and bring my lure back this way. So that's the third quadrant. Now we got the fourth quadrant. Fourth quadrant, if this one had a light over here, this one will probably have a light over here. So this would be my primary place to cast. I'd station the boat down here, and I'd cast it here, and I'd bring it back towards the boat. And you know, if I didn't get anything after fishing on the top, on the bottom, and in the middle, then I'd say, hey, maybe I'm going to move to this spot. And what I would do is, after a few casts, not seeing anything, not feeling anything, I'd say, all right, I'm going to go here. I'm going to cast up under here, and then I'll bring the lure back this way. And then last but not least, I'd go underneath the bridge, and I'd cast this way in the spot where we got the green arrow. Now, as far as my favorite lures to do this kind of fishing are concerned, it's kind of changed over the years. I used to like to do shrimp tails. I used to do very well with shrimp tails, bouncing them on the bottom. This past few years, I've done very well with this FLAIRHAWK. This is a 1.5 ounce FLAIRHAWK made by Hooked on Jigs. And this is a special one with an 8.0 hook. You're going to want the very biggest hook you can get, because you're going to want to pull these fish away from these pilings. And you don't want any, you know, crappy 5.0, 6.0, even 7.0 will bend under certain circumstances. So you want a heavy duty hook that you can crank down on your drag, you know, have 25, 30 pounds of drag and have this thing not bend. So this has been my favorite one. This past October, I got 9 slots one night, and another night I got like 5 over slots, all on the same jig, all in the matter of a few hours fishing one of my favorite bridges. Now, another popular lure is the NLBN. This is the 5-inch lime, key lime, I think it's called. And this is a good lure. I caught a lot of snook on this one. And my previous favorite, a few years ago, I was doing very well on this Gambler Big EZ. And this is, I think, a 5-inch smoked mullet color. And this works very well. You get a lot of tail action with that, and that works on some nights when the other ones don't. And this one is made by my buddy Dave Justice, or was developed by Dave Justice. The spool tack, it's kind of old school, same thing. A lot of guys still use these still catch fish. Same basic idea as the other ones. Got a tail on them and kind of wiggles. You want to pull the lure along so it's wiggling. You don't want to go too fast. You don't want to go so slow that the tail doesn't wiggle, but there's a certain speed where you feel that wiggling. On the FLAIRHAWKS, I do not jig it up and down. I do not do this. I just do a pull, a straight retrieve. So I would cast it up here and just pull it straight, whatever. Sometimes I'll vary the speed, of course, but I never jerk it up and down. I do that with the shrimp tails, but I don't do that with the FLAIRHAWKS. I just throw it, let it hit the bottom, and slowly crank it along the bottom for the bottom bites. For the top, I'll throw it on the top. As soon as it hits the water, I'll start cranking it towards me. And if I do the middle, I'll throw it and fish it, you know, like 4 or 5 feet down. These bridges are typically 10, 15 feet deep. I'll let it go down 6, 7 feet, and then I'll start cranking it and try to keep it consistent at that depth till all the way back to the boat. So that's the anatomy of bridge. You have not really fished the whole bridge until you've done a FLAIRHAWK on all these quadrants and you've done a swim bait on all these quadrants. Once you've, you know, fished the bridge and you've hit all these various quadrants, you know, it might be 30, 40 minutes later. So the fish could start biting at this quadrant when you're, you know, fishing this quadrant. You might hear popping going on over there. By all means, throw everything I said out the window. If you hear fish popping or you see fish, you know, smacking baits on some other quadrant of the bridge, drop everything, get over there, start fishing there. So I hope this has been informative. If you like the video, please subscribe. Please like the video if you like it. If you have something that I missed or you'd like to add, please comment below. I always welcome, there's a million different ways to catch these fish. That's the great thing about snook. And this is the way I do it, and I know a lot of people do it differently. I know some people jig their FLAIRHAWKS, but for me, you know, it doesn't work. I like the way I do it, and I think my results speak for themselves. So tight lines, everybody. Jay Linesider, have a good evening.